All right, welcome back to another developer session. Today we're going to be taking a look at adding NPC dialogue into our game. So I've got this tool, Dialogger, that I purchased a while back. I took a very brief look at it about 3 months ago, and it looked like it was going to solve everything I needed in regards to conditional dialogue trees and things of that nature. So we'll go ahead and import this. And as always, when importing an asset from the asset store, you want to make sure you're not overwriting any existing things. A lot of people like to include the standard asset packages or other various pieces that might already be in your package as part of the Unity defaults. So you want to make sure you're not overwriting with older versions or incompatible versions or duplicating the names of like effect packages. A lot of the time like to use the same exact name as the Unity standard package, but importing those into your project will cause compilation issues. So usually better safe than sorry is to import a package into an entirely new project just to make sure everything's okay, it works out the gate, and you're not going to have any issues. So let's go ahead and close here. We should now have some kind of a, there we go, Dialogger menu option with this variable editor. And we should also have a dialogue editor window, which will give us our tree for setting up our dialogues. I'm going to go ahead and put that here with my scene and game view. So to start with, in the game, we already have a few NPCs sitting here in the settlement section that have some sample dialogue associated with them. And I associate that dialogue via the interactable mechanism that I went over in one of my previous parts. So we'll just take a quick look at that code. Essentially what it does is it's going to track when the player's in close proximity and facing the object, and when the player presses A, it executes this interact coroutine. And we'll do some simple things like locking down the movement while we're in dialogue. But right now, we simply have this HUD manager dialogue thing that pops up with the text that we get back from this other data source and shows it on the screen, and the player presses A for each section of dialogue, and then once the dialogue's done, they are allowed to move again, and we're done with the interaction. So we're going to build our dialogue structure within the Dialogger editor for each NPC that we're going to use, and we're going to replace this HUD manager coroutine with initializing our Dialogger mechanism and calling that particular NPC's dialogue. And just for my own edification, I'm going to pull up the documentation here alongside this, just because I know I'm going to get to some point and find out, oh, I don't actually know how to use this thing. If I can find it. And I guess there's no documentation included. At least not that I can see. So if we get to that point where I need the documentation, I'll have to go looking online for it later. So first off, I do remember that Dialogger has this output section, and it outputs this file, which is the result of the editor. Now, one thing we're going to need to figure out down the line is how do we separate and store these dialogue files? Do we have all of the game's dialogue in one file, or do we split it up by scene, or what's the what's the best practice for this system? But for now, we're just going to go ahead and set up our first couple dialogue chains. So you can see here we've got a couple sample ones. We're going to go ahead and add a new item here, and we're going to just call this NPC1. Now we have our start. We press add to begin creating Dialogger objects. add text, wait, set variable condition, message event end. I think there's something you drag between these. There we go. Yeah, it's a click on the source and then click on the destination to create a line to it. So this has a text, and we've got some advanced stuff here. And advanced is... Okay, so we can insert variable values. So for instance, I guess if we were going to store the player's gender, we could, every time a pronoun is being used in the game in regards to the player, we could import the variable for he or she or, you know, whatever participle we're looking at. Name, portrait. We're going to worry about that in a little bit. For now, though, we'll just keep it simple. Hi. And we'll simply end that dialogue chain with just one little blurb. So NPC1. Now let's pop back to our scene, and we're going to choose this guy. I'm going to make note that my previous text there was item shop. So we're going to call him NPC1. And if I remember right, there should be some static dialogue options here to start a dialogue. Now what's this want? This wants a enumeration. That's right, it creates an enumeration based on the names that we've put into the dialogue editor. And this also gives a callback to be called when dialogue is finished. So because this isn't itself in a coroutine, we can't yield return it. So we do need a callback. What is a dialoguer callback though? It's just an action. Actually, I should cast just fine. So that build has succeeded. Now I do want to say though there's some other initialize that needs to be done. So what else do we have in here? We'll see how far we can get without looking at the documentation. Dialogger.initialize. Call this to initialize the dialogger system. I don't know what kind of effects calling that multiple times would have. So we're going to find a better place to do this at the beginning of our play. So, what do we have? Controller input tracker, this, that. Test startup. And we'll go ahead and create a custom thing for this. Let's see here. Scripts. So this wants an enum, but we need to do a so we'll derive our dialog enumeration from the key and pass that in. Now this is going to end up blowing up our other existing NPCs, though we can switch this around and just do a little backwards compatibility. Should have a try parse method. Okay, well, never mind that. So we'll see what happens with this. So I believe it was this guy. Absolutely nothing happened. I think there's some other stuff we still need to set up. So yeah, I think we skipped a step in here. So Dialogger comes with a mechanism for popping up a UI to show the dialogue, as well as enabling the player to make choices and a few other odds and ends like that, which we never actually set up. So let's take another look here inside of their setup. There we go, that pops up the documentation. Question is, how do we associate these things? So let's take a look at their example scenes. So they've got a bunch of code that wires this up. All right, so it looks like they've got a bunch of manual stuff going on with their old GUI system, which from a visual design standpoint, I'm not going to use. They do have a couple things like the audio cue when the text is being written, good or bad audio cues based on the decision. An indicator for a different audio indicator for when the text is done being written, but really we're only concerned with how they're getting the dialogue and setting the text, because I think, quite frankly, our existing system is fine for the moment. So they look for different inputs and they do this continue dialogue, which is fine. They use all the dialogue or events in order to tell the screen what to do. So I'm assuming when they enter the text phase, they're writing new text onto the screen. On started, on ended when the dialogue starts and ends. Instantly end if the player backs out for whatever reason. Window close presumably would be very similar to instantly ended. Yeah, okay. So really, I only care about how to get the text out of here. Okay, so let's go experiment. So we'll keep it as simple and we'll start with these three. Presumably this has the actual text data of what we need to show. Yeah. So let's take a look at our HUD Manager show dialog. Yeah, so this guy, yeah, HUD Manager dialog controller show dialog. So we'll add a few other methods here because we're no longer going to be calling this from a coroutine. So when we start the dialog, we're going to show our dialog controller. When it's finished, we're going to hide it. Well, we're also going to set the text to empty. Now, the other side of this we need is so we're going to start our dialog, and this returns nothing to us. And this callback is when the dialog is complete, correct? Yeah. So as long as our interaction's in progress, we're going to wait for the player to hit the A button. And if they do, we're going to continue the dialogue. Otherwise, we're going to yield return and let the frame continue. And presumably, I don't know the scenario in which a immediate cancellation of the dialogue or whatever would happen. I don't believe we have that. Since we're locking down the player's movement and all that, we don't really have that scenario yet. So we should always hit this completion callback. In progress will be set to false, and we'll continue and loop on out of the interaction. So let's see if we didn't ruin everything and if this is actually going to work. Sort of, kind of worked. Let's do a little bit more diagnostics. just noticed I put that in incorrectly. Let's see what happens with all this. So on started, so we hit all three of them immediately. Okay, well that, taking the end off of that didn't work. That crashed Unity. Alright, so we need to figure out what's going on here. Let's take a look at the documentation again. So, it's not actually waiting on any kind of interaction from the player before it proceeds to the next step in its dialogue tree, which, in my case, the next step is the end of the dialogue tree. So let's see here. Using the editor, blah, blah, blah. Alright, so We have our start node, our text node, which typically just has the normal information here. Branching text, which is a choice. Okay, we need to put a weight in our tree. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll wait on the continue. That's going to suck if we have to put that between every single frame. There's got to be a better way to handle that. However, just so we don't crash out Unity like that again, let's put a update. Go ahead and kill the dialogue if we press escape in case we end up in that endless loop again. So let's see if that weight was what we wanted. Well, not only was it not what we wanted, but our escape didn't actually do anything either. All right, let's see if that changed anything. Well, our dialogue showed up, but our continue didn't actually do anything. Our escape ended the dialogue, though, so at least there's that. So let's see here. So there's something we're missing in here. So the general idea is that each time we call dialogger.continue dialog, we should be moving to the next node in our set. However, the fact of the matter is, even though we are doing this wait on continue, assuming that's actually what that does, it's not actually registering that we're going to the end. We're just kind of sitting here and it's wait completing over and over again. So let's take another look at this wait branch. Cause dialog system to wait for a continue before proceeding, which allows you to wait for key press or in-game event. It's exactly what we want. Except the continue isn't going to end. Or at least our end event isn't being fired. I wonder if any of these other events are being fired. If these things, add events. If instantly ended is being called, or window closed, or any of these other ones. Just hook up to everything. See what so we can kind of expect the flow here of what's going on. Started text phase, wait start, wait completed, that. So our weight works when it's a timed weight. It's just this continue that doesn't work. Oh, I wonder if, let's try this real quick. No, okay. I was wondering if my input was actually picking up that I was starting the dialogue a second time, but that doesn't seem to be the case. So there's something up here. Why is this continue dialogue not actually continue past the wait? Or rather, the wait on continue doesn't actually care about our continuing. Yeah, there's nothing else in here that's particularly interesting. And continue dialogue does not have any other overloads. So that's a little tricky, but we've seen that the wait's fine on the wait on seconds. It's just the wait on continue that doesn't seem to want to register. And of course there's no forum or anything like that. Well, that's kind of backwards from what I would think. At least that's what that forum post was saying I should do. So we're doubling up our continues every single time. Didn't actually do anything anyways. Not only did it not do anything, it crashed the system. Alright, so after doing a little research on the Unity forums, I found that there's actually a bug in this dialogger system that the wait on continue node that we were adding to our dialog editor earlier doesn't actually work with the dialogger continue. So the recommendation was that in this wait phase class, in our overridden continue method, we add this wait complete and comment out this dispatch call, which wait complete does the same exact dispatch call. It just changes the state to complete rather than calling this base.continue, which I don't know exactly what the ramifications of removing this base.continue will be. It seems to... I mean, quite frankly, I'm not sure exactly what it does without, without really digging in. I guess I'll find out if there's some weird issues later. But for now, once Unity pops up here, you can see that, we get our dialog pop up, and when I press A to continue, it finishes just as I expected. It's kind of an obscure thing to have not work in your system. Like, it's very peculiar. It seems to be a fairly common problem from what I read, though. And the creator says he'll be having an update, but I mean, quite frankly, he was saying he would have it out by Unity 5, and we are quite past Unity 5 coming out, and there's been nothing, so I'm not sure exactly on the state of this project. But either way, we have the entire source code right here, so if something does come up, it's not like we can't just fix it. But anyways, that's about all we're going to do for this first part. So thank you for watching, and have a nice day. So after all that finagling with the source code, it turns out that we didn't actually need this wait node in our dialog structure. The initial problem was because our dialog interaction was triggered using the button A press, and we are still technically in the same frame of animation as that call. We were immediately bypassing through this, continuing the dialog automatically without ever showing it to the user, and ended up in a scenario where it looked like nothing was ever happening, which, if you'll remember at the very beginning of the video, was kind of the scenario I saw. So by adding the simple yield return null to force the frame of animation to finish before processing the next input request, we can safely trigger our dialog, wait for the button press, and when the button press occurs, our dialog goes away and our events continue as expected. As I said before, without this wait continue. Now, the fact that this wait continue didn't actually work before editing the code that is part of the third-party component is still true, and that's still a problem. But based on my usage of the component, I'm not going to even need to put this wait in, which, quite frankly, with more complex dialogue, having to throw this wait continue between every single node transition was going to be stupid. Anyways, thank you for watching, and we'll come back next time. We'll deal with storing variables in our dialog system and dealing with conditional dialog trees based on those variables. And somewhere in the middle, I'll suppose I'll figure out how to separate these files up into more scene-based. What's the word I'm looking for? More of a scene-based file rather than having this just one file for the entire application. Thank you. Take care.